Hey everybody, welcome to Q&A video number 69. Don't you even dare start laughing at that, you immature buggers. But anyway, make sure to keep asking questions. Doesn't matter about, they can be about anything. Just know that I do not respond to review requests or Let's Play requests in these videos, but I will respond to those in the comments. And if you do have a review request or an MTL request, please check the master list that is available on my channel's About page before you do so. And more importantly, don't ask me when a video is going to come out because I can't tell you that. The videos get done when they're done. Anyway, you know how a review request is. It's basically asking what do you think about insert game here. If you're asking about a very specific feature of a game or something surrounding it in the news, that's perfectly fair game for a Q&A, but other than that, I'll just relegate answers to those in the comments. The gameplay in the background is of Magicka 2 because it ties in pretty heavily to the first question for this particular Q&A, which is from Tiger King. What do you think of Easter eggs, and do you personally hunt for them? How does Magicka 2 tie into that? Well, it has a ton of Easter eggs in it. I mean, the original Magicka did as well, but it's all kinds of weird in-jokes and all kinds of cultural references and things like that, so you get a ton of these Easter eggs in the Magicka games, so they're a great demonstration of this. But other than that, Easter eggs are just fun when they're done well. If they're not done well, then they're just kind of like, meh, whatever. And it's nice to have little nods here and there to other games that the developer's done, or nods to particularly significant influences or things like that. But when you just throw in something there that has really no place being there at all, and you just sit there and go, what? It's not really all that fun. And as for the second part of that question, I don't really go on specific hunts for Easter eggs. If I stumble across one, that's great, but I don't specifically go looking for them. Next question is from Mecha Bradzilla. Do you have pets? Yes, I do. I have a dog, 2 birds, and 2 rabbits. Next question is from the Master of Unlocking. You said before that you're a big Ghost in the Shell fan, so what do you think of Scarlett Johansson as Motokoku Sanagi in the upcoming film? I think it's just Hollywood trying to get a big-name actress to play a character because they think that Ghost in the Shell is not a strong enough IP to work on its own. Why there even needed to be a live-action Hollywood production of Ghost in the Shell to begin with is completely beyond me. It is extremely Japanese. And while I won't really go into Hollywood whitewashing, which is definitely a thing, I will just say this. It's kind of idiotic to take a series that is so inherently Japanese at its core and try to make a typical Hollywood production out of it. It's like what they tried to do with the Dragon Ball movie, and we all know how that went. That movie was friggin' atrocious. And so I envision the exact same thing happening with the Ghost in the Shell movie. It's not because of Scarlett Johansson. I mean, she's an okay actress, but that's relying too much on star power and not having any real confidence in your script or your direction. And from what I've seen so far about the details of the movie, it's gonna suck. So that star power won't exactly get them very far, and it really feels like a complete waste at this point. Of course, Ghost in the Shell has been going through a bit of a rough patch lately to begin with. I mean, you had the reboot series Arise, which really wasn't very good, and then they made the new movie, which that actually is the title. It's Ghost in the Shell, the new movie. The fact that they named it that just screams lack of creativity. And while I have yet to see that particular movie, I can't exactly imagine it being all that great because it's based on Arise. And then now we've got this particular monstrosity of a Hollywood movie, which is going to be just typical Hollywood popcorn fare because that's all they seem to know how to make, and they couldn't go with something as complex as Ghost in the Shell to save their lives. Anyway, before I get too irritated about this, let's move on to a question from Names Ausanan. What is your stance on interracial couples? I guess the best response I have for this is actually a question for you guys. What year is it? I don't think it's the 1950s. I'm pretty sure it's 2016 at this point. As far as I'm concerned, if you have a problem with the color of someone's skin, you can fuck right off. Does that answer your question? If not, well, let me spell it out for you. This shouldn't even be an issue. People are people. I don't care what the color of your skin is. I don't care where you came from. As long as you care about each other, that's all that really matters. Moving on to a question from rybrentmannftw. What are your thoughts on certain movie and game franchises running too long and not only ruining the legacy of said franchise, but also basically becoming parodies of themselves? It's incredibly depressing sometimes if it's a series you've really gotten into and then you just watch it self-destruct over time. He actually went on to give the example of the Halloween franchise, where the first one is actually a fantastic slasher flick. Hell, I'd argue that even the first sequel is actually a pretty damn good slasher flick. But beyond that, the series just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and just ran itself into the ground. Same kind of thing basically happened with Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, any number of these slasher flick franchises. Pretty much anything Michael Bay produces at this point is actually pretty much a parody of itself. The Assassin's Creed series has run itself into the ground. The Call of Duty series has effectively run itself into the ground, which is pretty sad actually. And you just get all these different series that if they put too many of them out, they just end up becoming effectively worthless. And that's just depressing. That's treating these things like they're just products rather than anything beyond simply products. You don't really treat movie and video game franchises in the same way you treat, for example, sandwiches or something like that. And that's pretty much what the running itself into the ground mentality is really all about. It's basically treating it as a disposable resource. And as far as I'm concerned, nothing in the video game and movie scene is outright disposable. A lot of companies seem to think that it is, but it's not. It's not just something you can toss aside when you're done. It will always be there. It has a legacy of some description. It's basically part of the DNA of gaming. If you have a game like, for example, Daikatana, which was generally considered a pretty terrible game when it came out, it still is important to the history of games. Call of Duty Ghosts is pretty much the same way. Sure, it's a crap game, but it has something to say. But then there's something like Fallout 4 that comes along and not only is just completely stomping all over the legacy, but it's doing it intentionally. It's just disgusting to see something like that happen, and I can't even really describe the feeling of pure, unadulterated hatred in my gut when something like that happens. I can let, say, the implosion of Call of Duty after Call of Duty 4 or the implosion of the Assassin's Creed series slide because they were more modern games and they just kind of gradually fell apart. But something like Fallout 4, where they intentionally stomped all over a legacy of nearly 20 years, and where that legacy includes two of the best games ever made, with those two games influencing countless titles to come, that is just completely unacceptable. And it's downright disgusting that they're basically allowed to get away with it. It's just depressing in the case of, say, Call of Duty or Assassin's Creed. In the case of something like Fallout, where it's willfully stomping all over an established legacy of excellence, then it's just insulting. And I think that's a pretty good way to close out this particular Q&A. Make sure to keep asking questions. I can't do these Q&As if I don't get questions, so make sure to keep asking them, and I will catch you guys in later videos.